You know what's been kind of hanging in the air for the drone industry? A real game changer that feels perpetually just out of reach.
Let me guess, Part 108, BVLOS.
Exactly. Routine BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight flights. We've all been waiting for the FAA's Part 108 regs, the rule book that should finally unlock all this potential. But lately, the question keeps coming up. Is Part 108 still the priority we thought it was?
Yeah, that's pretty much the core of what we're unpacking today. Think of this as your direct line to understanding the current situation with Part 108.
Okay.
We've pulled together info from places like Commercial UAV News and Advecture, both giving, valuable perspectives on where things stand, why it's such a big deal, the hurdles, and what the future might look like for commercial drones here in the U.S.
So our goal today is pretty straightforward. We want to give you a clear, concise understanding of the whole Part 108 landscape.
Yeah, cut through the jargon.
It's exactly. Cut through the regulatory stuff and focus on what really matters for drone tech moving forward. So let's dive in. What exactly is Part 108 and why does it hold, well, such huge potential?
Okay, so Part 108 is basically the FAA's upcoming set of rules specifically designed to standardize beyond visual line of sight BVLOS operations for commercial drones.
Right.
This is a really fundamental shift from how things work now, which mostly relies on getting individual waivers under Part 107.
Part 107, that's our current rule book. And the big limitation there is that visual line of sight VLOS requirement. Basically, you got to keep your eyes on the drone unaided the whole time,
right?
Which, severely limits how far you can fly and the scale of operations.
Totally. Think about inspecting, say, miles and miles of power lines or a big pipeline. Under VLOS, you're doing loads of short flights, moving crews around constantly. It's just not efficient.
Not at all.
And that's the gap Part 108 is meant to fill. Its origins, they go back to the BVLOS Aviation Rulemaking Committee, the ARC.
The RC, right.
Yeah. The FAA pulled that together back in June 2021. And it wasn't just FAA folks talking to themselves.
No. Who was involved?
It was a really diverse group. Big names like Amazon Prime Air, Wing, but also law enforcement, industry experts, you name it.
So this was like a big collaborative effort to figure out how to do BVLOS safely.
Exactly. And in March 2022, the ARC handed over this massive 381-page report.
Wow.
Yeah, with 70 recommendations. And the main one, create Part 108. A new set of rules to make safe, routine BVLOS flights possible.
Okay, and what kind of rules we're talking about? What's Part 108 actually expected to do differently than Part 107, tech-wise, procedure-wise?
Well, we're expecting new tech requirements, definitely, especially for detect and avoid systems. Systems, onboard stuff that lets the drone see and steer clear of other aircraft or obstacles on its own, using radar, cameras, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Then there'll likely be updated pilot training and certification, stuff specifically for BVLOS, focusing on, the unique challenges when you can't see the drone.
Makes sense.
And, of course, new operating rules, how and where you can fly these longer missions. The whole idea is to build a complete framework so U.S. drone operations can really, get to that next level.
Okay, so Part 108 sounds like it's the absolute key for unlocking a whole bunch of new drone capabilities. Yeah. What are some of the real-world applications we're looking at? Why is everyone so keen on BVLOS?
How? The applications are potentially huge. Game-changing, really. Imagine inspecting those big infrastructure networks we talked about, power lines, pipelines, railways, all in one go, one mission.
Instead of dozens.
Exactly. Longer-range drone delivery suddenly becomes practical, right? Expanding service areas, making it more efficient. Think about farming, monitoring huge fields for crop health, irrigation issues, much more efficient with BVLOS.
Yeah, I can see that.
And public safety things like drone as first responder programs. Their reach could be dramatically extended, getting eyes on an emergency scene anywhere in a city much faster.
That paints a really clear picture. Less legwork, more coverage, faster responses.
Yeah.
Definitely sounds like a big jump in efficiency. Are there big economic upsides too? I think I saw Advecture mentioned cost saving.
Oh, absolutely. The ROI for drone programs is set to get way better. You can run things more centrally, cover more ground with fewer launches.
Right.
Which means lower costs per inspection, per delivery, whatever the mission is. It could even make projects viable that were just too expensive or complicated before under VLOS rules.
And it's not just about saving money or being more efficient, is it? I remember reading, maybe in Commercial UAV News, about the U.S. needing to keep up, globally speaking.
That's a really critical point. Edwin Sanchez, he's the CEO of VOTX, he warned about this. While the U.S. is, working through the rules, other places, Canada, Australia, lots of EU countries, They're moving ahead with more advanced BVLOS regulations.
So we risk falling behind.
That's the concern, yeah. Falling behind on innovation, global competitiveness, if Part 108 keeps getting pushed back.
Okay, so staying competitive globally. What about safety? Intuitively, flying drones further seems like it might raise safety issues, but I've heard arguments that maybe the opposite is true with a standard framework like 108.
That's right. It sounds counterintuitive, maybe, but the argument is that having clear, consistent BVLOS rules under Part 108 could actually improve safety overall in the long run.
How so?
Well, instead of the current waiver system, which can be kind of a patchwork, Part 108 would set standard requirements for crucial things like drone equipment, those DAA systems you mentioned, and pilot training.
Okay.
That standardization aims to make things more predictable and ultimately safer for everyone in the airspace.
And it's not just commercial stuff, right?
Yeah.
Public safety gets a big boost too.
Definitely. Think about those drone as first responder programs again. Right now, they're pretty much limited by how far the pilot can see. With Part 108, a police department could say, launch a drone from HQ to an emergency miles away. Get real-time info to officers before they even arrive. Mary Caitlin Ray, she used to be an FAA attorney, called the ARC's work a Herculean effort. And Part 108 could really integrate drones better for public safety.
Okay, so we get why Part 108 is so important. But man, it feels like we've been talking about this for a long time. What's the actual timeline been? Where did things start? And where are we now?
Yeah, the timeline, it's definitely been more stop than start, unfortunately. When the BVLOS ARC kicked off in June 2021, there was a lot of optimism.
Right.
By late 2021, the FAA Administrator at the time, Steve Dixon, even targeted the end of 2022 for the NPRM, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. That's the first official draft of the rule.
End of 2022. That sounded pretty quick back then. So what happened? What went wrong?
Well, the ARC did its job. They delivered that huge report in March 2022 laying out the blueprint. Everyone kind of expected the FAA to follow up relatively quickly.
But they didn't.
Nope. End of 2022 came and went. No NPRM. By mid-2023, the delays were really starting to get noticed. And like you said, industry patience was definitely wearing thin.
So we went from expecting in 2022 to radio silence. That had to be frustrating for businesses trying to plan. Did anything happen to, push things along?
Yeah, Congress stepped in. The FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 that was signed into law May of last year, 2024, it actually mandated the FAA propose the BVLOS rule within 4 months.
Okay, a deadline from Congress, September 16th, 2024, right?
That was the deadline.
Did they hit it? Did we finally get the NPRM?
Unfortunately, no. September 16th passed, still no NPRM. Then at the Commercial UAV Expo that same month, FAA folks basically said, yeah, we missed the deadline, but we're now aiming for the end of 2024 or maybe early 2025.
And here we are, May 2025. Still no NPRM. Although I have seen some chatter recently, reports saying the draft rule is finally moving through the review process.
That's right. The latest word is the draft BVLOS rule has made it to the White House for interagency review.
Okay, what does that mean, interagency review?
It's a required step. Means other government agencies, Justice, Homeland Security, Defense, Transportation, etc., get to look at it, give their input before it can be published for the public to comment on.
Gotcha.
And it's worth remembering that same FAA Reauthorization Act also set a deadline for the final rule to be done by January 2026. So the clock is still ticking, legally speaking.
But the bottom line is, we're way behind schedule. What are the reasons? Why the big delays rolling out Part 108? It seems like everyone wants this.
Well, there are several pretty complex factors going on. First and foremost is safety and security. The FAA's #1 job is keeping the skies safe, right?
Sure.
And introducing a totally new kind of operation like routine BVLOS into the national airspace, which is already incredibly complex.
Right.
Well, that takes extreme care. They can't rush it.
Okay, fair enough. Safety first. What else?
There are just a lot of tricky issues that need input from different agencies. How do these drones safely share airspace with planes and helicopters? That's huge.
Integration, yeah.
Then you've got privacy concerns, national security stuff. That brings in the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, Department of Defense. Getting everyone on the same page takes time, a lot of time.
And didn't we also have a change in administration since this whole thing started? Could that play a role?
That's definitely a potential factor, yeah. A new administration often means shifting priorities, new perspectives on things. Regulatory agencies like the FAA need to make sure big new rules like this align with the current administration's overall goals for aviation safety. That review and alignment process adds time too.
I also remember seeing something, maybe Commercial UAV News reported it, about FAA layoffs earlier this year. Could that be slowing things down? Fewer people to work on complex rules like Part 108?
That's a relevant question. You're right. There were reports of FAA layoffs around mid-February this year. Quite a few employees let go. Now, drawing a direct line saying that's why Part 108 is delayed is hard. But, it's reasonable to wonder if having fewer staff impacts their ability to push through complex rulemaking like this one.
So it sounds like a mix of things that need to be super careful about safety, coordinating between tons of agencies, maybe political shifts, and potentially even staffing levels. It's not just one simple bottleneck.
Exactly. It really highlights just how complicated it is to introduce something as significant as routine BVLOS into such a highly regulated, safety-focused system.
Okay, so we've got a good handle on Part 107, the current way, and Part 108, the future we're waiting for. Can we dig into the key differences? Like, what are the main shifts operators really need to be ready for?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's break down some key areas. Operationally, the biggest one is distance, obviously. Part 107 is VLOS, visual line of sight, unless you get that special waiver.
Right.
Part 108 is built for BVLOS. It'll let you fly beyond line of sight routinely as long as you have the right safety gear on board and follow the rules. That's what enables those long-distance missions.
So no more needing to physically see the drone. What about the pilots? Did their qualifications change?
Almost certainly, yes. Part 107 needs that basic remote pilot certificate. Part 108, we expect it'll require a special BVLOS rating or certification.
Okay.
Pilots will probably need to show they understand advanced stuff like risk management for remote flights, how to integrate with other air traffic when they can't see, emergency procedures for BVLOS. The ARC even suggested adding a specific BVLOS rating to the knowledge test.
That makes total sense. Flying further away means you need more specialized knowledge. What about the drones themselves? Are the equipment rules going to be much different?
Oh yeah, significantly different. Part 107 doesn't really mandate specific tech like detect and avoid.
Right.
But Part 108 is expected to require systems like that. DAA systems, plus really robust communication links. The idea is the drone has to be smart enough and reliable enough to operate safely when the pilot isn't right there watching it.
So more advanced drones.
Potentially even some kind of type certification for drones approved for BVLOS to make sure they meet certain safety and reliability standards.
Okay, more sophisticated gear. How about getting permission to fly? Right now, if you want to do something outside standard Part 107, you need a waiver.
That's a huge difference. Under 107, BVLOS needs that case-by-case waiver, which can be slow and complicated to get.
Yeah.
Part 108 aims to set up clear rules. If you meet the requirements, the tech, the pilot training, the procedures, you should be able to fly BVLOS routinely under the rule without needing those one-off waivers every time.
Ah, so it moves from special permission to standard procedure, if you qualify. That's key for scaling up.
Exactly. That shift is crucial for the industry to really grow.
What about where these drones can fly? Airspace, altitude limits, any changes expected there?
Part 107 mostly keeps you under 400 feet above ground and mainly in uncontrolled airspace. Part 108 will likely still have altitude caps, but we expect more flexibility in where you can fly. Maybe dedicated air corridors or zones for BVLOS flights. And there will definitely need to be clear procedures for flying in controlled airspace, working with air traffic control. The goal is smoother integration into the whole national airspace system.
Okay. And the basic rules of the sky right-of-way. Who yields to who?
Under Part 107, it's crystal clear. Drones always yield to manned aircraft, period.
And that's likely staying.
Oh, almost certainly.
Right.
That fundamental safety rule won't change. However, the BVLOS RRC did propose something interesting.
What's that?
They suggested that if a manned aircraft is flying low, like below 400 feet, and isn't broadcasting its position with ADS-B.
ADS-B, the tracking tech.
Right. If they're not broadcasting, maybe they should be responsible for yielding to the BVLOS drone in that specific low-altitude scenario.
Huh. So kind of flipping the script a bit based on technology.
Sort of. It acknowledges that these BVLOS drones will have onboard sensors to detect things and puts a bit more onus on low-flying manned aircraft, especially those without ADS-B, to be aware. It's a subtle shift from pure see and avoid.
Interesting. So drones using their tech and maybe some manned aircraft needing to be more proactive down low. One last difference. How many drones could one pilot handle under Part 108?
Good question. Part 107 is typically one pilot, one drone.
Right.
Part 108 is expected to open the door for one remote pilot to manage multiple drones at the same time, maybe from a central command center, like a remote operations center or ROC.
Oh, okay. Like an air traffic controller for drones.
Kind of, yeah. Imagine a utility company overseeing a whole fleet of inspection drones from one room.
That needs super reliable command and control links, obviously, but it's a massive efficiency gain.
Okay, that really clarifies how different Part 108 could be. Big changes across the board. Now, thinking about these delays we've discussed, what does that tell us about how the FAA is approaching this? And more importantly, what should people and companies be doing now to get ready for whenever Part 108 finally drops?
Well, the long delays, they definitely signal a very cautious, deliberate approach from the FAA.
Safety first, like you said. Exactly. They're clearly prioritizing getting the safety aspects right and figuring out the whole integration piece, which probably means the initial Part 108 rules, when they come, might be pretty strict, really focused on drones and manned aircraft safely sharing the sky.
And maybe not opening the floodgates all at once.
That seems likely too. It could point towards a phased rollout. Maybe BVLOS starts in less busy airspace, first rural areas, or maybe flying over infrastructure, shielded operations before it gradually expands into more complex environments.
Okay, so expect caution, expect maybe a gradual start. For you listening, what are the practical things you should be doing today to get your operations ready for Part 108?
I think the smartest thing is to focus on building a really strong safety culture now. Have solid standard operating procedures, SOPs, make sure they're well documented.
Right.
Invest in good emergency training for your pilots and crew. Keep meticulous maintenance logs for your drones. Basically, operate as professionally and safely as possible under Part 107 right now.
Build that foundation. What else?
Start thinking about potential BVLOS use cases that might be easier wins early on, those low-hanging fruit opportunities.
Like remote inspections or mapping in uncrowded areas.
Exactly. Things that might fit well into those potential early phases of Part 108. Identify those now.
That's good, actionable advice.
Yeah.
Anything else for the checklist?
Definitely. When the FAA does finally release that NPRM, get ready to participate in the public comment period.
Why is that important?
It's your chance to give feedback. Share your real-world operational experience, point out potential issues, suggest improvements. That input can genuinely shape the final rule.
Okay, so engage with the process.
Yeah. And think about your equipment. Maybe start looking at investing in drones and tech that are built for BVLOS, longer flight times, backup communication links, maybe even integrated DAA if it's available and makes sense for your future plans.
Future-proofing your fleet, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. And don't forget your pilots. Start thinking about upskilling them, training on things like crew resource management, managing workload when flying remotely, advanced situational awareness, BVLOS emergency procedures.
So training beyond the basic Part 107 stuff.
Exactly. Preparing them for that next level of operation.
Any other ways to prepare that might be useful?
Absolutely. You can use the existing Part 107 waiver process. Try to get experience with BVLOS legally now, even if it's for limited operations.
Gain practical experience.
Right. The data you collect, the lessons you learn from those waivered flights, that's incredibly valuable. It helps you prepare, and it might even help inform the FAA as they finalize Part 108.
Good point. Contribute data.
And just, stay plugged in. Keep up with FAA announcements, industry news, what's happening with Part 108. Things can change, so staying informed is key. Be adaptable.
So, summing that up, despite the wait, which has been longer than anyone hoped, Part 108 still seems like it is coming. And this time right now isn't just waiting time, it's prep time. An opportunity for the whole industry to get ready for what BVLOS will bring.
Precisely. The delays are real, no doubt about it. The expectation is still very much that Part 108 will happen, and it will fundamentally change the commercial drone landscape. So this period before it's implemented, it really should be seen as a chance to get ready your tech, your operations, your people for the much bigger possibilities BVLOS will open up.
So for you, the listener, maybe take a moment to think about what this big shift means. For innovation, for safety, for the future of whatever industry you're in or interested in, what new possibilities get you excited, and maybe what challenges do you see ahead in making BVLOS work safely and effectively in our skies?
Yeah, just to recap quickly, Part 108 is still seen as the key for routine BVLOS in the U.S. Yes, it's delayed significantly, but things are moving, and there's that congressional deadline for a final rule by January 2026, pushing things along. The main takeaway, preparation is absolutely critical right now for everyone in the drone space, safety, tech, training.
Great stuff. Thanks for joining us for this in-depth look today. And yeah, really think about that final question. What does BVLOS mean for you? Maybe dig a bit deeper into some of the tech or the rules we touched on that caught your interest. Thanks for tuning into this deep dive.